Hi, everyone, and thank you for coming to listen to this talk on death and grieving and how, as mindfulness practitioners, we can just acknowledge those feelings that we experience when we have a loved one pass, from our circle of love that was, right, how they're right next to us. And I'd like to tell you a story just to begin. During Buddha's time, there lived a woman who went by the name of Kisa Gotami. And she married young and she gave birth to a son. But one day, this baby fell sick and died. And Kisa, she loved her son greatly and had a hard time accepting that her son was dead, that he has passed on. And so she carried the body of her son around the village, asking if there was anyone who could bring her son back to life. And so the villagers all saw that the son was already dead and that there was nothing that they could do. Right? They couldn't turn back the hands of time or administer any kind of medicine or anything like that to bring him back to life. And so what they did was they advised her to accept his death and to make the necessary arrangements for the little boy's funeral. But in great grief, she fell upon her knees and clutched her son's body so close to her, so lovingly. And she just kept uttering and saying and asking for her son to please wake up. And a village elder took pity on her and suggested to her that she consult the Buddha. And he says, Kisa Gotami, we cannot help you, but you should go to the Buddha. Maybe he can bring your son back to life. And Kisa was so extremely excited hearing these promising words from the elder. So she immediately went to the Buddha's residence and pleaded for him to bring her son back to life. And so the Buddha told her, Kisa Gotami, I have a way to bring your son back to life. And she was so happy to hear this. And she replied that she would do anything that the Buddha asked to bring her son back to life. Anything. And Buddha replies, if that is the case, then I need you to find me something. Bring me a mustard seed. But it must be taken from a house where no one residing in the house has ever lost a family member. Bring the seed back to me, and your son will come back to life. And so Kisa, having great faith in this promise the Buddha had made, she went from house to house trying to find the mustard seed. And so she went to the first house, and a young woman offered to give her as many mustard seeds as she wanted. Absolutely. But when Kisa Gotami asked if she'd ever lost a family member to death, well, that woman replied, that her grandmother died a few months ago, so she couldn't use those seeds. And so she thanked her and explained that this is not what the Buddha requires, right? And so she moved to a second house. And in that house, the husband died a few years earlier. And then she went to the third house, and they lost an uncle. And the fourth house she went to, they lost an aunt. And she kept moving from house to house to house, but the answer was all the same. Every house that she had visited had lost someone to death. And so Kisa Gotami finally realized that there was no one in this world who has never lost a family member to death. And so now she understood that death is inevitable and it's a natural part of life. And so, putting aside her grief, she buried her son in the forest, and then she returned to the Buddha and became his follower. So not only did the Buddha allow Kisa to teach herself that death is inevitable, he could have easily have told her, your son is dead. Go back and arrange his funeral and accept his death, and so forth. But sometimes it's hard for people to accept that. And so sometimes there's a lesson to be learned in going through the motions of realizing that death is inevitable. It's going to happen to everyone. It's going to happen to you. It's going to happen to me. It's going to happen to people around you. And it's certainly going to happen to people around me as well. And so, through that teaching, through that example of Buddha and the mustard seed and the young woman who lost her happiness, her son, there's some basic Buddhist beliefs that help us understand that death is natural. And the first part is that death is a natural part of life. It's going to happen. And we understand that everything changes. Nothing is permanent, right? And suffering may not always be what we think of suffering as maybe a cut or a broken bone or something like that, but it could also be disappointment or sadness, right? It's not necessarily what we think of suffering, in a big, the big concept of it, but it could be this. It's just the small things as well, right? Small little disappointments in life can also be considered suffering. And so we understand that true happiness and enlightenment and the freedom from that suffering can be found through the Buddhist teachings and through the Dharma. And through those teachings and understanding that death is a natural part of life, we understand both wisdom and compassion are to be developed. Right? Wisdom and compassion, not just for ourselves, but for others as well, and we can help others along. And that when death occurs, that spirit is not extinguished, right? It's not just gone, right? Instead, it's transferred into another life, right? It's transferred into another life. And we'll talk about karma coming up, but karma is what determines what form that spirit will be reborn, whether it's a human or an animal or whatever. But that karma, and a karma error is your actions during your lifetime. And karma doesn't have to be bad. A lot of times we hear karma as, oh, karma is getting you. So that's only the negative side of karma, right? There's a positive side. You do good, you get good. You do bad, you get bad, right? It's very much like in the Christian Bible, right? You reap what you sow. So karma isn't necessarily something on the negative side. And it's also important to realize and to understand that grief is normal. Right? Grief is a normal emotional response to the passing, to the death of someone that we have known and someone that we have loved. And it doesn't even have to be a person, right? It could be your dog, that maybe you had for, you know, a few years, or it doesn't even matter how long, really, right? It's not necessarily, just a person. It could be something, anyone, or any being that we have loved. It could be your horse, if you had horses. It certainly could be. But it's important to understand that and to accept that those feelings could be anger, could be sadness, could be, you're questioning, well, why does it have to be you? Why does it have to be now? Right? Death doesn't have an age, right? Death does not have an age. And so all of those questions and the feelings that you experience when someone passes on are normal. It's normal to feel them, and it is appropriate for you to just accept them. I accept that I feel sad. I accept that I feel angry. I accept that I feel confused. Or question your own. Why am I still here and they're not? That is perfectly normal. And so as mindfulness practitioners, we understand that, and it's appropriate to investigate them too. Why do you feel that way? And it's not, the simple answer isn't necessarily just because they passed, right? We understand that, everything is temporary, and including our lives, but we can investigate further. Maybe go down a little bit deeper into why those feelings are within us and that we are feeling them at that particular time. And again, those feelings may change, right? They're going to change from they could change from one moment to the next. Sadness right now, 15, 20 minutes later, anger. 20 minutes later, questioning. And each time, accept those feelings and investigate them a little bit more. But be kind to yourself, right? It's important to be kind to yourself at the same time. And so, like I mentioned a short time ago about what karma is and how we are brought back into existence after our body uh, passes on and our consciousness is brought forward um, to another living being. And so, what is karma? But in the Buddha taught that every action causes an effect, whether it's good, bad, or neutral. And this is resulting in the accumulation of that karma that will shape the person's future and what form he will be reborn and whether he will suffer or be happy, experience positive or negative moments. So the Buddhists do not believe in an eternal soul that goes to meet God in the Christian sense, or in one that is continually reincarnated. That's in the Hindu sense, but rather the concept of rebirth or Buddhist reincarnation has been described as lighting a candle with a flame from another candle. And so our consciousness goes on. And the Buddha even described, um, he answered the question for um, someone who asked the question, right? Well, how much longer do I have to suffer? How much longer How many more times do I have to be reborn? And Buddha's reply was, as many leaves as there are on that tree. Right? It's until you learn. Right? Until you learn whatever life's lesson that needed to be taught. So how do we connect with our grief? And as I alluded to earlier, when we connect to our grief, or how we connect to it, is by acceptance, right? We don't ignore it. We don't deny our very own grief, right? It's a part of us. It's a normal response to a natural part of life. Just like you would be happy at a wedding, right? You're seeing two people join themselves, join their families, and it's an expression of their love, right? We don't hide our feelings there, right? Or for the birth of a baby, we don't hide our emotions, on a joyous occasion. And the same thing for death, right? We don't have to ignore or deny them, but we can remain calm and be serene with it because we can accept it. And so how do Buddhists grieve, or how is a way that we can grieve? And so again, death is a natural part of life, and it has an inevitable rebirth. All right. And this may lead to those outside of that faith to believe that grief is minimalized in our traditions, and that's not the case. Because again, grief is a universal emotion, and those left behind, right, must learn. We have to learn to adjust to a new life without that loved one. Just like when a new baby's born, right? We have to adjust our lives. We have to be quiet, maybe change diapers and so forth. Make sure that new being is well taken care of. And so it's an adjustment. You may have been with that particular person who's passed on for many years, decades, right? You may have been with that person for decades, and so that's going to be quite a change. However, when Buddhists are around someone who is perhaps getting ready to pass, right? That can be just as hard as well, right? They may be on their bed, perhaps getting ready to die, and so that's a solemn experience. Perhaps you're in the room, perhaps you're even holding their hand as that person consciousness begins to slip away, and that's a solemn moment. That is a very spiritual moment, the passing of another person. And so, if that is you at a time in the future, or maybe it was in the past, but certainly in the future, if that's you ever find yourself in that position, remain calm and serene at the same time, right? Remain calm and serene to help that person who is passing on. Let them slip away peacefully. And so again, grief is universal. It's not appropriate to deny it, right? The sadness that we feel. And so investigate it. Investigate the multitude of feelings that you have felt, or maybe in the future you will feel, when someone close to you passes. And if anyone needs any additional help, I am more than happy to, or had someone to talk to, I'm more than happy to talk with you and help guide you and move you through, help guide you through this particular difficult situation. Because remember, people are social creatures too, right? We're social creatures, not designed to necessarily do everything on our own. And that's why we take comfort in each other at times. And I'm here for you as well. And I thank you very much for your attention for this talk on death and grieving. And I wish you all the peace and tranquility in the life and on the path that you're walking. Take care, my friends.